You're listening to a fight against free kill laws from AMP Media Production Studio.
Welcome to the Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we give a voice to those who have suffered firsthand from medical malpractice. In Florida, families devastated by medical negligence are left without justice because of a law many don't even know exists. Florida's free kill law prevents families from holding doctors accountable. These are real stories with real loss and no justice. Contact Ed at 561-239-2417 or visit afreekill.com. Today we uncover the truth, share real stories, and demand change.
Good evening, friends, and thank you again. Thank you very much for taking the time to tune into our podcast. We have some very positive things that are happening. I'm very glad to report that House Bill 6003 made it through with clear majorities. As a matter of fact, it went through the Judiciary Committee with a 15-1 vote. The only opposing vote was Representative Fabrico of District 110 in Miami-Dade. Everyone else was a yay. We continue to be eternally grateful to Representative Dana Trabulsi for getting the ball rolling, and then the senators picking it up. Again, our deepest thanks. If you go to the Florida Medical Rights Association website, there's a posting all the time of what's current, what's going on, and you can get the list of the senators and the representatives that are supporting us. Also, there are a couple of very good websites. If you go to flhouse.gov or flsenate.gov, you'll be privileged to all the information you want about either the representatives of the state of Florida or the senators of the state of Florida. You can there are tabs to look at any individual bills or anything about the senators themselves, so you know who your senator representing you is. As we learn more about how the Senate Bill 1700, when we learn more about it, we will share that as soon as we can. As it's my understanding that currently the Senate bill is not on the calendar for any of the committees yet. And it's my understanding that we may have a very, very little notice from the time it goes on the calendar to the time it's actually being heard. So those of us that would like to be in Tallahassee for these occasions, we have to stay vigilant, stay informed. I know the people from the Florida Medical Rights Association will do everything they can to help keep us all informed. Our guest today is Teal Graeter, and she has a very, very powerful story to tell. Her mother moved to Florida to retire, and only to suffer terribly at the hands of a hospital. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce Teal. Good afternoon,
Hi,
Teal.
Ed. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Thank you so
me.
very, very much for taking the time to join us. And again, we know that sharing these stories is difficult, but we're so very, very grateful that you're willing to do it.
Well, I appreciate it. It feels... Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So to begin, just tell us a little bit about your mother. I know you and I have talked prior to this, and I know what a special person she was. But please, share your thoughts.
So my mom, first of all, everyone who knew her called her Barbie dear. She was our Barbie dear to all of us, our kids, everyone. And she just was so full of life. the most positive person you would ever meet. So many stories at her funeral of people telling how she came through for them and she helped them and she always was doing for other people. And she just had so much energy, I mean, she was just amazing. And I said, like, growing up with my mom, if I had to say one word, would be magic because she just was so good. Um, she loved the beach and she was a Kentucky girl, born in Kentucky. My dad was raised in Florida, ironically, and he loved horses in Kentucky. And my mom always wanted to get to the beach, always. And so after we lost my dad, my mom moved her last 3 years. She lived in Florida full time. And that was tough for me, selfishly, really tough for me because she was always present, always with us and with our kids. And I'm so thankful she got to do that because it was something she really wanted to do. But at the same time, it ultimately cost her life at the end. But she loved Florida and she wanted to be there. And she was such a beach, she loved her mermaids. On the back of her pamphlet for her funeral, it was mermaid kisses and starfish wishes because she was a mermaid at heart. And just a light. She was a light to everyone who knew her. And also strongest person I've ever known. And that's her on the hoverboard.
And she's
That
quite
sums up my
athletic too,
mom
huh?
to me. And just adventurous, like not her age, she was older, but her age she never acted her age. She always said she was 18 till she dies. Was her thing. And she just was fun. She was fun. She was so good. And the best mom. I mean, the toughest, strongest person I've ever known. Everything through my dad's illness and losing him. She was just so good. A really special person.
All right. Well, now take us to the beginning, the events that began with this tragedy.
So, it all started on November 16th in the middle of the night. So technically Sunday. Again, so tough. I mean, she drove herself to the ER in the middle of the night and all of this pain. And she went to like the satellite ER for Sarasota Memorial. So out by where she lived in Lakewood Ranch. And they, did an original CT, thought she was going to need more care. Early that morning, they took her by ambulance to Sarasota Memorial. And her cousin was awake by then and got her messages and got to her. And then we got a phone call around 10 o'clock that morning from my mom's cousin that she was in the hospital and, she couldn't talk. So I always was red flagged that, like, I couldn't have a conversation with her. I knew she was really sick. And really bad stomach pain, vomiting, so nauseous. So they were trying to do like the CT with contrast. And by the time they did the CT, it was like 7 p.m. before they took her back for surgery. So she drove herself around 4 a.m., 7 p.m. She was taken back for surgery. And I was boarding a flight to Sarasota. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. So I was boarding a flight. And I get a call that she is septic and going for emergency surgery as I'm boarding the flight. And then I land. By the time I land and I didn't have to check a bag, get out to the car, the surgeon was calling me to let me know that she was in the ICU, intubated, watching her for recovery. Went well. They ended up having to do a Whipple procedure on her, which most of the time you hear about, with pancreatic cancer, but it wasn't that. It's because she had a perforation in her duodenum, and it was the location was so close to her pancreas. So they had to do a Whipple, and they called in a specialist for that. And ironically, her original surgeon is actually a family friend of my dad's and family and a good person. That's the hard thing with all of this is the bad overshadows good people with all of these things. So, we got to the hospital. We were able to see her for a bit in the ICU. They were happy with how the surgery went. They knew it was going to be a hard recovery because it was a major surgery. And then I'm trying to get myself caught back up through the days, but
she had no symptoms prior to that night that she drove herself to the ER.
none. I mean, we were actually texting at 9:30 that night about Christmas poppers because it's a tradition, and she was supposed to be coming up that week to stay all the way through New Year. She was supposed to be coming up for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and um, we were texting about all of our traditions and getting things, in order. And my mom's cousin had talked to her that night, was going to pick her up the next morning for church. No, nothing. And actually, she had just days before been released from her shoulder surgery she had with physical therapy, and she was so excited. Like, she was just so happy and excited, and then this happened.
Okay, so it's 4 p.m. She's in the ICU, and you're on your way to the hospital.
Actually, her surgery was 7 p.m. at night. So by the time I got there, it was about 10. And that's when we got,
okay.
the call. And they let us come in to see her, since we were coming from out of town. But they're quite strict with their hours. So she did okay through the night. The next day was a lot of very sedated, keeping her as comfortable as they could. Like, I'm looking at notes. Looking back at all this, there were so many chaotic moments and just disjointed. It just never felt like there was a chief or a quarterback. Nobody was really
taking charge.
The whole experience. Yeah, that's really how it felt. Like, every time you would talk to one person and feel like you knew the plan, 30 minutes later, the next PA would change the plan and you would never meet them. It was constantly moving. And just to say on the front end, my sister-in-law is a doctor. And so she was very good at, like, we were in real time getting her records and, getting lists of questions to ask and knowing things often before the nurses knew, like, we were seeing reports and results. And I say all that because I can't imagine anything more we could have done as a family. Like, that's gone through my head a lot. And I can't imagine
sure.
people
I understand.
don't have, I know you understand. Yeah. I don't know if you want me to keep going with the rest of what happened, but
yes. So when did a problem? Or when did the problem start?
So we were kind of going back, comparing all of our notes, and that first Wednesday after surgery, it almost gave us all a false hope because it was such a good day. Like, they had removed the intubation. My husband and my brother, oddly enough, were the first ones there that day because you'd only have 2 at a time, and we had a rotation going. So, and I didn't sleep at night because I was the phone call if something was going to go wrong, and I remember that from my dad. So I didn't sleep for a long, long time. I was so afraid, So they went first thing in the morning, and she immediately opened her eyes and was like, "I love you. I'm so happy to see you." And, she said, "How are my babies?" And that was in reference to the grandbabies,
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you know my mom, everything's spotless. You can't take a sip out of your cup before she's got it, in the dishwasher. So she said, "Did you find clean sheets?" It was like the first thing she wanted to know. So that day, and then even later in the day, her nurse mentioned she asked for her cell phone. We were like, oh. So I think we all kind of had a little bit of a false hope that day, or else the infection was starting. That ultimately led, to the end with her. And, they were cautiously optimistic. They liked how she was doing. She was quite stable. They were,
They were
having
quite confident that they could manage her.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were confident for, like, a couple of times they told us to take a breath, like we were so scared. And then you would think it was okay. And then there'd be a setback but, I think it was even that Wednesday, it might have been the Tuesday. I'm trying to glance back, but she got up with help, took steps, was sitting up in the chair for hours, She was really determined, she wanted to fight.
So this all sounds like a pretty routine post-op recovery.
Right. So far, and then it was, okay, I'm like just glancing that Thursday, which would be the 20th. of November, just this past November. I mean, we're pretty fresh with this. Was probably the hardest day, other than obviously her dying. But they kind of just went full stop on all of her pain meds, and she was very agitated and very anxious and in so much pain. Like this part, I'm sorry, is hard because she kept saying like, "Just let me go. I'm gonna die," and I think she was just in so much pain and disoriented from all the medicines, all the drugs, everything. I'm sorry.
Did they give you
Um,
and well did they give you any explanation for why they were withholding pain medication?
no. I mean, they wanted her to be more awake. They thought she was drowsy, which was understandable. I mean, they were giving her really heavy duty meds, and we kept telling them, like, she's tough and she hates pain meds. Like, she's had 2 shoulder surgeries and took nothing but Tylenol and Advil. Like, she's just tough and she doesn't like how pain meds make her feel. Um, so we kept asking if there was something else they could give, instead of like just stopping things on her. Um, but it was really hard to watch. That was a really hard day for all of us. And she wasn't passing the swallow test, so we were swabbing her, but she kept just wanting water and was so thirsty and just so anxious and wanting to squeeze our hands. And it was just tough. And they were worried about, at that point they started worrying about her chest, so they were doing chest x-rays all the time. And you know it was just a shift. Like, our minds were thinking the long term and planning and getting her out of there and getting her home, or where would we go next. And then everything just kind of changed that day, and it never really got better. They never fully got her under control again. I mean, they tried at times. It would always vary who was there or who was making the call. But that was
And
probably her worst night.
and she was still in the ICU at that time.
She was still in the ICU.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm like, my brain, because I'm emotional now, so my brain is glitching a
That's
little
okay.
bit. But I'm trying to
Take your time.
remember which day they moved her down, because that was its own circus. Like, they kept telling us, so this would have been on Monday the 24th. So that's how far removed we were from surgery. They kept telling us that she was going to be in the ICU a few more days, her surgeon, and then all of a sudden we come back for the nighttime hours, and they're rapidly moving and they're unplugging and doing orders, and they're going to move her to the step down floor. And I actually cried. I was so upset because I knew she wasn't trending that way. I just knew it wasn't the right move, and I was so confused about it. So they moved her down at night, which was awful. It was very disorienting to her. It was a lot of jostling her around, and she was in pain. And it was like a PA we never once met, that made the decision to move her down when her surgeon had just told us, the opposite. And like, immediately when she got to that floor, everything just really spiraled. It was just such a lack of care. They were overworked. They were so busy down there. I mean, I have a picture from one day, which this could be, I'm not being ugly, but they left a syringe, hanging from her arm, halfway administered. And I'm taking a picture and I'm like, should this be here?
Yeah.
And in the ICU, they had a lot of empty beds. Actually, it was the trauma ICU, so it was a smaller unit, and it just made no sense to any of us why they did that. Because it was very obvious when we got down there. She was not as attended to. Not,
Was there a
everything changed
physician?
when she moved.
I'm sorry. Was there a physician, the attending surgeon or an intensivist or a hospitalist? Was there any physicians that were giving you any
We
explanations
saw
for this?
no one that night. We saw no one that night but the nurses. No one. I mean, there was, her night nurse we had before, and we were asking, why is this happening? And she's like, so and so made the decision, who
So and
was
so.
the provider. That's what they call it, the provider. There's always a provider in that area, and we never met this particular one, not once. And they said, well, we think this is going to be better for her. She's going to be more comfortable in here. But it was not. It was never more comfortable. And my uneducated opinion on all of it is I think they had too many patients for the amount of care that was available. And I think she was sitting there
For
a
the
lot,
amount of care that was
not
needed
getting-
in the step-down unit.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have enough personnel.
No,
And it would
no,
be
they
interesting. It would be interesting to know if it was a hospitalist that made that decision for the transfer, and if that hospitalist consulted the surgeon.
Yeah. It's a good question that I honestly don't know. Until we were going through, we got all the records, and it was like 8,000 pages. So until we were kind of going through all of that, we never knew who ordered the. We didn't even know her name. The step down. So I know she was the provider for that trauma ICU, and she was on that night. It was nighttime. Everything changed at nighttime a lot there, and she made the call, and I really don't know why. I don't know why. I don't know if she talked to her surgeon. He didn't seem happy the next day. I can tell you that. The next morning, he was chewing out the nurse at the desk. Like we overheard it. He didn't seem happy that she was moved down. He didn't seem happy that things weren't done overnight and certain tests. He didn't seem happy either at that point.
Well, I'm not familiar with the term provider. To me, provider is the insurance company.
I kept saying, by the end, I was so sick of that word. I'm like, if we have to hear provider one more time, what does that mean? Like when you're trying to speak to a doctor, or you can't reach anybody, we'll get there. But finally, at this point, they had ordered a CT for her. And actually, I'm sorry, the CT was on Thanksgiving, I'm getting my days wrong. The 25th, my niece's birthday. Everything's blurring.
It's okay.
So my brother, his family, they were there. Everyone was there at that point, and his two young girls. My three older kids had flown down for a day for Thanksgiving and to see her, and she was coherent and with it. A lot of pain, uncomfortable, not feeling well, but she was very coherent when I said, Mom, is it okay if the kids come to see you? And she's like, yeah, I just don't want to scare them. She knew. She was very much with it. So that Tuesday there was a CT, and the records were in early, and my sister-in-law saw them, and it was pointed out that this is a radiology report, that there was a potential abscess near her kidney, and it had and it wasn't there previously. And it had been recommended to just follow up on it, correlate it with lab work, urinalysis, all the things. So we came in with a list of questions, and I think it was 9 a.m. we were allowed in. We started asking to speak to a doctor because I asked, and she was like, I'll get the provider. Again, it was another nurse practitioner who was a provider that day. And I knew that one. She had been with Mom on her toughest day in the ICU, and I was kind of excited, like, okay, at least I know her and she'll come in and talk to us. And then I guess she was in surgeries and she was busy, and the entire day went until 10 p.m. before a doctor came in that day. And my brother and his wife were in at that point. I was with my husband and the kids, and they all day said, like, when we would ask the nurse to ask, she would take a picture of all my questions and send it to the provider. And then they would just tell us they're not worried about it. They're diuresing her because she was holding fluid, and they were, giving her diuretics to get rid of the fluid. So they kept saying, we're not worried about it. We're not worried about it. And then we were, because we watched the bun ratio, creatinine numbers. We know a lot about that from my dad's health. And to the point I didn't even want to ask about them in front of my mom because of everything she lived through with my dad, So we knew it didn't seem right. And we kept asking. And so finally at about 10 that night, they let us stay until a doctor came. So my brother and his wife were in there. And actually the doctor who was there at the very end came in, and he was so dismissive and arrogant and just so awful, really, for even asking about it. And he just said, well, we didn't nick her kidney, which none of us said. And he said, like just so dismissive about radiology. I mean, I almost was trying to go back at my brother's notes because he has a witty way of putting things, Um, but I just really want to find his exact words, but he was just basically slamming radiology. Like they're overbearing, a little dramatic. They always put things that don't mean anything. So obviously we're all just so taken aback by that because it was A, unprofessional, and B, why do you have radiology?
Sounds like he was
Like, what's
hiding
the point?
something. Yeah.
It was really odd. I mean, it was
Yeah.
really odd, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And that I will just flag the conversation. That ultimately was the only source of infection found on her autopsy. And they never ever checked it again.
Well, let's back up to the resuscitation.
That's next.
The effort.
So that was after. So we kind of get through these few days, right? And it was just, you could just tell trending the wrong way. Like white blood cells were going up more. Everything was trending the wrong way. And I mean, even we were watching her urine turn darker. Like everything about it was going the wrong way. And so we would ask every day and they would tell us they're not concerned, right? So then fast forward to Friday, November 28th, the surgeon came in and he wanted to order a nuclear medicine test, a biliary scan, which we thought was really odd because she doesn't have a gallbladder. And my sister-in-law was also in there and she's like, I don't see any drainage that you would be looking for, right, at this point. So the surgeon we knew came in, also didn't think it was necessary, but like his words that I just won't forget because of what happened was, but it won't hurt anything. So rather than doing the CT of the area, that had been flagged, for some reason we're doing this scan. So they take her down, like around 12:30, noon or 12:30 to do this scan. And my sister-in-law and I were so happy because we finally felt like we had a veteran nurse. Like she came in, she was on it. She was, making changes, recognizing so many things that should have been done. We just finally felt like we had a good team that day. We're like, okay, our surgeon we know is back here today. The nurse cares. And you could tell she knew her stuff. Like we were so excited. And so we walked mom down for the test, like with the transport. And then we left to go buy the nurse a gift, actually. We bought her a candle and we bought treats for the nurses because we were just happy. Like we felt like we finally had somebody that was taking action. And we came back from getting getting the nurse a gift and we're getting off the elevator. And I won't ever forget this. Sorry. It was like a bad movie, You get off the elevator and the blue lights are just going, everywhere. And you could hear them saying code blue. And I knew it was my mom. I knew. And my sister-in-law looked at me like I was crazy for saying that. Why would you say that? She's doing really well. And then we tried to go into her unit. Like we pushed the button to come in and they told us to go to the waiting room, so I really knew it was her. And then, I remember the PT guy had come out the door who had been in there that morning. And I was like, that's my mom, right? And he said, Baxter. And, he wasn't supposed to tell me, but he shook his head yes, So we go to the waiting room and I'm, trying not to hyperventilate. And the code team, the guy comes out. It really just felt like a movie. It was so overwhelming. And, asking if we want them to resuscitate her. And it was just so shocking and so overwhelming. And, my brother was at the movie with his 2 little girls. My husband was at my mom's house because we thought it was going to be a good day. And I was just like, please, God, don't let this happen. I can't do this part alone because, I had been through this with my dad and I don't know. I know that eventually, I think it was like 5 minutes, they got a heartbeat, they got her back, and they said they were going to take her to the ICU. And then I heard like code blue again. And I knew it was her. And my sister-in-law was like, no, that's the wrong floor. And I was like, no, that's the ICU. Like I knew the floors at this point. And So they rushed us, through a back way into this trauma ICU again and put us in a room kind of across the way from where my mom was, where they were working on her. And she actually coded 3 times through all of this. And then, we're calling my brother and we're like, you have to get back here. And that was like, they were like 45 minutes away. So, he yanked these little girls out of the movie and they came back and they made it back. And the surgeon came in and, they were talking to us and telling us all the different things and that they were going to have to start like a temporary dialysis, I mean, we had to look at my mom's living will and read all of her things and know, we'd read it, but I knew we needed to read it again. And so my brother just said, if this was your mom, would you do that? Like, we didn't want to ever push it further than, we knew she didn't want to have a bad quality of life. So they said, yes, they would do it. And oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. We kind of have to move along, but in our discussions, you told me that there was one critical error.
Yeah, right. It was right now at this point.
Share that with us, please.
So we didn't hear about it till the next morning. So keep in mind, we stayed overnight. I'll just tell you how it unfolded. We stayed overnight. They never made us leave the ICU waiting room that night. We flew our kids back down. 2 of my best friends came down and they were helping with the littles and, we're all in the waiting room. My uncle's there. And so at about 2 something, the day she died, the 29th, the same surgeon came out and said, I want you to look me in my eyes and hear me tell you that we made a mistake and it's inexcusable. And we just sat there like, what's the mistake, So he said it happened after coding or during coding, and we were putting in a central line in her interjugular, in her neck, and they put it in her artery instead of her vein. So, and they told us that they were trying to stop the bleeding at that point. I mean, and my brother was like, what do we have to do? I'll hold it. Like, it was that everything was unfolding at warp speed. Our kids were hearing all of this. It was
didn't they tell you that they were inserting the central line with the use of ultrasound, that it was being guided by ultrasound?
Yes. He said that's when he said it was inexcusable. It was ultrasound led and it never should have happened. Yeah. That was the day before.
I've been in resuscitations before when they have, and this was before ultrasound, but
yeah.
when they inadvertently hit the subclavian artery instead of the subclavian vein, but immediately that you're in the artery and not in the vein. So I can understand why the surgeon would tell you that it was simply inexcusable. And they even though they were in the wrong vessel and they administered medications.
Yeah, propofol we saw, blood thinners, and I'm not sure what else. But
And
I mean,
these
this
were all
was like
going
18
directly
to
to her
20
brain
hours.
So they were going directly to her brain.
Yeah, for about 18 to 20 hours. And also at the same time, he told us that the dialysis on the other side of her neck did not work because the pressure in her neck was too high, which makes sense with what was happening on the other side. And they tried putting in a line through her groin at that point. But I mean, she had gone all this time without getting what she needed with dialysis,
Yeah. Teal, I'm so terribly sorry, but in just a few minutes here, could you tell us about how you became familiar with the free kill law?
Yeah. So, we made it through the funeral and Christmas, and I don't know how, but we did. And it wasn't until just a few days before her service in Florida, which was January 11th. So midweek that week, we finally had the courage to talk to an attorney that our friend had put us in touch with, very well-known malpractice attorney. And he just straight told us, he just gutted us, completely shocked, caught off guard. We had no idea that existed until that day. So, I mean, there were 2 different instances with what happened with my mom, and nothing mattered.
The medical error
sense,
and then the injustice.
Yeah. And it made sense, the demeanor. A lot of things made more sense once we learned about the law, I guess I would say. I mean, there was nothing we could do about it because she wasn't married. She was a widow, and we're all over 25.
And the thing that we always keep trying to stress is, nobody's looking for any fortune. Nobody's looking for any jackpot justice.
No.
What we want is accountability
No.
and justice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I don't want a penny. Nothing. Yeah. Nothing's bringing our mom back. We want,
right.
To me, this is not political. This is humanity. I mean, it's just so vile. And there's nothing that's bringing our mom back, but nothing's making them better. Nothing's making this hospital change the way they're doing things, or those doctors learn
And
from
that
the mistakes
and that is what this movement is all about. Teal,
Yeah.
thank you so very much for sharing your story. I'm so very glad that you found us.
Thank you. You all are amazing. We're just beginning to understand all of this. So you all have done amazing things.
Well, thank you so very much, and we will stay in touch. Okay?
Thank you, Ed. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Take care.
You. All right. Thank you very much, friends. We'll be back next week with a couple of more stories. Please help spread the word. Like, share, and follow. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you for watching The Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we interview those who have dealt firsthand with medical malpractice. Families are devastated by medical malpractice and left with no justice. This isn't just a loophole. It's a failure to protect the ones we love. It's time to change the law. It's time for accountability. Contact your state legislatures, visit afreekill.com for more information on how to help, or contact Ed at 561-239-2417. Because every life should matter.
You're listening to A Fight Against Free Kill Laws from AMP Media Production Studio.